Three, two, one. Here we are, Anthony. 10 o'clock. We're ready to rock. Sorry that we're a minute late, you guys. Anthony just had to get a last-minute tweet out about our live event here. Really looking forward to this one this week. We've got a lot going on in the Bitcoin market with the miners. We've got the Fed rate meeting today, widely anticipated to start seeing some rate cuts, which should be good for stocks in general, equity markets, and of course, Bitcoin. We want to touch on that. And Anthony, you brought along some of your famous tables and charts. Full review or analysis of August mining results. So a lot to get through today. How are you doing this morning, Anthony?
Yeah, all good today. Ready for the show.
Just got out of the sauna, buddy. You're feeling limber and ready to go?
All fresh, ready to go. Yeah.
All fresh, ready to go. Good to hear. Good to hear. We'll get right into the presentation here, you guys. As normal, we've got about 8 macro slides or general updates to get through. Then we're going to be going through each of the miners as it relates to their August production. But if you have individual questions, you're more than welcome to leave those in the chat. In addition to that, our Ben interview with Bitfarms has been pushed to next week. So just wanted to give you guys a quick update on that as well. Sorry for the delay. There's just some travel coming up on schedule for Ben. Moving into the presentation here, you guys, we've got the price of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was doing pretty well this week, Anthony. Up in the 60, 61, 62,000 range. A little bit of a pullback this morning in anticipation, I guess, for this rate cut decision and where that will really take the markets here. The big debate is whether this is going to be a sell the news situation or lead to an additional rally. So what do you make of the Bitcoin price itself here, Anthony?
Yeah, the Bitcoin price is just doing what it's doing. It's still sort of, hovering in that sort of, mid to high 50s. It hit 60,000 a couple of times this week, but probably waiting for, some good news stories to come through to lift it again. We've seen the ETFs, constantly buying. So, there's not a lot of pressure on sell for Bitcoin, but it looks like a few people are out of space at the moment and waiting for those to return when it starts getting interesting.
Yeah, it certainly does. I know a few of the technical guys on X or in the community have taken some short positions here in the immediate future. So we'll see how that goes. We're up to 20 concurrent viewers, you guys. So hopefully we have 20 likes by now. If not, it's free to do. It helps us out in a big way. We'd really appreciate it. Slide number 2, hash price, Anthony. Hash rate, global hash rate. Just crested over 750 exahash globally, sitting just at 761. This continues to creep up despite some of the pressure we're seeing on the margins, the price of Bitcoin, the hash price itself. Any surprises here or similar to kind of our last commentary on the global hash rate?
I mean, I'm still surprised myself personally because the 7-day average now for the Bitcoin hash rate has reached 700. So that means it's hitting that 700 with more regularity, and therefore that impacts mining companies in terms of that'll affect the difficulty, and therefore production gets reduced. And we're already hearing from a number of miners that it's challenging at the moment at the sort of the hash price to make any real margins in Bitcoin mining. And we've already seen 3 or 4 M&A activities happening this year already, and there's likely to be more between now and the end of the year as well. So we really thought there'd be some pullback post the halving, and there hasn't really been. I mean, yes, it probably got back to 500, but in general terms, it's been at 600 or more on a rise, and who knows where it ends at the end of the year.
Yeah, interesting to watch the dynamics here, but definitely not getting that drop off post halving that I think a lot of people, including ourselves, were expecting. So interesting to keep an eye on global hash rate. Now, difficulty as well, Anthony. This is another one interesting here. Average block time sitting at 10 minutes, 47 seconds. So obviously above that 10-minute target threshold, meaning difficulty maybe on its way up again, hey?
No, this is difficulty potentially going down.
Sorry, down.
Yeah, so what we're saying is from that chart there, it should take 10 minutes for every block to be found. It's actually taken on average 10.47 minutes. So, getting close to 11 minutes. So that means that the difficulty needs to make a little bit more easier. Now, this can change. You know, the 25th is another week away, so this could change. And looking at what we've just seen now with regards to the 7-day average for the hash rate at 700, which is a high, I'm assuming that gap falls, or even we get into a sort of like another all-time high. So we're already at 92 and change trillion. You know, from the last update, this is suggesting we'll go down to 88.54 trillion. But you know, the likelihood is that that gap will close, and it may even become more difficult as we get closer to the date. So the volatility of the difficulty does change as you go through the 2 weeks, and as you get closer to the date, it just gets that more volatile.
Yeah, most definitely some big numbers there in the trillions, and appreciate you pointing me in the right direction, Anthony. I guess it's a little early for me here with the difficulty adjustment. Good thing we've got our expert. Now, I am able to speak to this one, the mid-morning market update, Anthony. Core Scientific really holding up quite well compared to the other miners today. Not sure where they're at right now. Just a couple of minutes ago, they were in the 5% range, nearing those 52-week highs. You can see the 52-week range at 1225. So really showing that stability, I guess, based on those big HPC revenues expected to start next year. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Soluna, IREN, interestingly enough, and Bitfarms all in the reds today. So kind of a mixed bag. Anything stand out on this chart for you, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, you've already highlighted Core Scientific, market cap already 3.1 billion now. So think where it was when it came out of Chapter 11, which was significantly lower than that. It's just been on a drive throughout the year, just one good news story after another. And you know, we've seen the interest in, you know, mining companies who have power, and the move to HPC. We're literally now down to probably only 2 miners that haven't currently stated they're going to go HPC, and that's Riot Platforms and CleanSpark. But Matthew Schultz has just put out a tweet today highlighting that BlackRock of putting together 30 billion for, you know, in terms of a fund for AI technology. Now, Matthew Schultz came out last week and basically, you know, slammed those miners that were moving towards HPC, basically indicating that they didn't really know what they were getting into. There's no sense of real profit margins or revenues or whatever in that industry. And time will tell. I mean, time will tell very quickly, because in 2025, you're going to see Core Scientific start receiving some of those revenues that are in that contract document that's been well publicized on their website, and the table that shows you the actual profit after all costs. And we've talked about that, you know, 4.7 billion over a 12-13 year period. That would take some Bitcoin price for any of the miners to get anywhere near that figure from a profit perspective. Bear in mind, when you look at Bitcoin mining, it's very much energy intensive in terms of a lot of energy, a lot of cost to mine a Bitcoin. And yes, HPC is also energy intensive, but nowhere near in terms of the revenue to energy usage. So the margins are really, really high in terms of the HPC. We've already seen that with IREN's update. You know, they were achieving 98% margins in the month of August on their HPC contracts. Now, it doesn't take into account the capital expenditure of the GPU, so that needs to be bearing in mind when you're looking at some of these costs. But just looking at the energy, their energy margin from mining Bitcoin was 51%, and their energy margin from HPC was 98%. So you can understand why, you know, majority of the miners on that sheet there are focused on driving HPC as well as Bitcoin mining, and some of them have actually stopped growing. In, you know, we've seen a couple of miners who have said we're not going to grow any more hash rate in Bitcoin mining. So the likes of Bitdeer Digital have said there's no more growth this year. They'll focus on HPC, and also TeraWulf have said there's no growth for next year, or they're not going to give out a growth target in terms of Bitcoin mining, because again, they're fully focused on delivering HPC, and they've got 2 projects at the moment that are running, you know, HPC models. And, you know, the expectation is that we're going to see one of these miners like a TeraWulf or like a Cypher Mining probably announced in the near future that they've landed a contract to deliver a significant HPC business.
Gotcha. Yeah, really exciting to watch that side of the industry develop. Now, Anthony, I've switched out to our market cap slide here as you were talking about the Core Scientific market cap. surpassing 3 billion now. So second only to Marathon. CleanSpark, Riot really dueling it out for that third position. The group has expanded since last week. Hut 8, Bitdeer, back in the billion-dollar club. Cypher is just $3 million away. So we're starting to see some market cap appreciation, at least since last week. What do you make of this top group now in terms of consolidation? We've talked a lot about M&A. The general thesis from a lot of people in the space, Anthony, is we're going to start to see 4, 5, 6 behemoth miners over the next few years. Is that basically what we're looking at in this green box?
Well, that's the sort of the theory behind it. That that there may be only sort of like 5 or 6 big miners in years to come, but we've still got close to probably 30 public miners in North America, so it's not happening as quickly as everyone maybe anticipated it. But when you look at that group there, you really have to sort of like look at the likes of CleanSpark and Riot, who are now just above the 2 billion. Bear in mind, CleanSpark were 4 billion back in March as a market cap, and Riot have been as high as 7 billion, 8 billion back in 2021. So they're way off their all-time high as a company. And those two companies have categorically said, we're not moving into HPC. So maybe, and we've talked about this, maybe Wall Street and the retail market are actually focusing on these miners that are coming out with the HPC business plans and giving them a little bit more credibility. Even Marathon have hired 2 new directors who are from a sort of like data center technology background, which will help them drive some HPC. Because one thing about Marathon is they tend to get it right, even though sometimes it's always a bit late to the party. They'll turn things around. I mean, they were asset light for about 2 years, and now they're sort of like focused on getting everything in infrastructure. And then they've been buying Bitcoin, so they've used the MicroStrategy business strategy going forward. And now they're saying they're going into HPC as well. When all but a month ago you thought they were a pure play miner.
And just to add there, Anthony, we also saw Bitfarms backfill Ben's position by splitting his role into 2 head of mining and a head of infrastructure facilities. So that, to your point, also indicates potential interest. I wanted to get your comments. Scott Richardson brought up, hey guys, I expect nothing in terms of the Fed decision today, except for CleanSpark to go down, which unfortunately has been happening every day. The reason I wanted to bring this up, CleanSpark is still a top hold of mine. I'm obviously not happy to see them going down. You just alluded to their market cap essentially getting cut in half over the last few months, Anthony. Do you think this downtrending is a result, or I guess indirect result, of not bringing up HPC in the conversation? And is that why they're relative to other miners just underperforming here?
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, we spoke to the great thing is, Bryce, me and you we've had discussions with these analysts. We spent 2 days with them back in June. We got to know them. We got to meet them again in July at Nashville, and the storyline hadn't changed. In June, they were not interested in the Bitcoin mining business for all these mining companies, whoever they were, and that was obvious. We looked at the group that attended the Denton facility to talk about the HPC contract, and the following day we were at Corsicana. Me and you loved both days for different reasons. It was great, but we didn't see nowhere near as many analysts attending the Corsicana day, and they're all staying in Dallas, so it's not like they had to travel any further. The transport was laid on for them to take them to each facility, so it's just that they chose not to. And when I asked why they weren't there, they just said that Bitcoin mining at the current price wasn't attractive at the moment. And you can understand, I mean, these companies have all just recently released their earnings, and every company on that sheet there, effectively had a red quarter. They issued an overarching loss on their quarterly earnings. So, that's with Bitcoin mining. That's with Bitcoin mining post, or sort of like partway through a halving, and we're going to go into, at the end of September, we're going to get the first quarter that's going to be totally from post the new halving. So the last quarter had, the first 19 days of April pre-halving. So it had an element of the pre, when the hash price was like $110 a day, and we're talking about the hash price now at $40. So it's dropped $70 from pre-halving. That's a lot of revenues for a miner to try and, turn around in terms of how can we reduce our costs. Now, some of them have been really good, and we like what we see at CleanSpark. They're doing everything right in the Bitcoin mining space. They're buying the sites, they're getting the most efficient mining machines, they're growing hash rate in line with their strategy. I'm going to say they'll achieve their target this year, 37 exahash. They're actually even given a way out of just getting to the 32 without any problem whatsoever. But they've chose to raise that target based on an additional few sites to get 5 more exahash. So, take your hat off to them. But the market isn't really paying attention to Bitcoin mining, and this is where we are at the moment. All those miners, look at Wulf's share price. Look at IREN share price, how that's driven. Look at Core Scientific share price. I mean, Core Scientific are, in terms, different from the rest in the fact they've got this enormous, not just a contract, but an enormous contract. Yes, Bit Digital have got a great contract as well, and we know IREN and Hive are delivering probably close to $15 million of annualized revenue in HPC, but $15 million of annualized revenue is literally going to be a couple of weeks for Core Scientific. It's not, they're going to be taking, $1.3 million a day in profit. So if you look at 2 weeks of profit, they're going to be doing 15 million, 16 million over 2 weeks.
Incredible.
So this is how you look at the comparison there. So the Core Scientific price, and I stand by what I said, probably a month ago, 5 weeks ago, that Core Scientific will be the highest market cap. And bear in mind, there's a lot of warrants to be exercised in Core Scientific. And when those warrants get exercised, that market capitalization rises quicker. So every time a retail investor exercises their warrant, so pays that $6.80, whatever it is for the warrant, and gets a full share, that will increase, that extra share will increase their market capitalization. So, and they've got, I don't know if it's close to 50 million of these warrants. That's another significant amount of potential increase in the market capitalization. On top of that, when we start seeing the physical revenues coming through and they start announcing, we're getting these quarterly payments in from CoreWeave, that will also sort of top things off, because it's great. Theory's great, but people want to see, the realistic, amounts coming through. And that's what Bit Digital have been able to do. They're slightly different. They've got a client. They can't wait to put out their monthly update and tell you how much they've earned in HPC revenues, because it's on every update. I mean, the only miner that puts in anything about any other business that they do other than Bitcoin mining, most of them stick to Bitcoin mining, but Bit Digital put everything on there because it's good. I mean, why not? Why not highlight it? All miners should highlight it. All their businesses, a monthly update. I think transparency goes a long way nowadays. We've seen that happen. If you try and hide things, you can't hide it in a quarterly earnings update. You have to be open and transparent. Otherwise, you'll have the SEC all over you. So why not be upfront and transparent? And we like that. We like what IREN did last month when they highlighted the fact they had a problem with their energy. And so this is good. But believe you me, that Core Scientific market cap's got a long, long way to go. I mean, we talked about the valuation. I mean, it could be just on the HPC alone between 8 and 10 billion. And they still got a 20 exahash Bitcoin self-mining business that's doing really well and will improve, because they're going to get a load of, I think it's 15 exahash of block miners they've ordered, so from block, and they'll be far more efficient than what they're using at the moment. So that means their Bitcoin mining business will be improved. They've already got access to reasonably low power, but having more efficient fleet than they've got. And bear in mind, they've already got one of the most efficient fleets anyway, but this will be an even more efficient fleet when they put these new machines in.
Okay, we will cover the miners in a second here, Anthony. You're getting too excited. You're all into the individual miners here. We've got a lot to talk about. Anthony, like you say, though, we do appreciate the transparency. And when we've got keen accountants like yourself digging through the numbers, that kind of stuff comes up. And if we hear about it in advance, at least you've got a little bit of context as to why. So Core Scientific, great day, continuing to trend up. I've got, I think, 2 more slides for you, Anthony, and then we can get into some of those details. I actually have the core slide with that full contract that you're talking about. This one, very interesting, Anthony. So we've talked extensively about how the game changer this year was ETFs and the adoption of these ETFs. For me, really allowing an on-ramp for the general public wanting to get into Bitcoin. Interestingly enough, Anthony, I actually had one of the CEOs approach me yesterday from the McNallie money side of the business here, or the YouTube channel. And he was interested in adopting a Bitcoin standard using some of their balance sheet and wanted some information and some contacts. So we're starting to see this become more prevalent. And I asked him, how are you going to manage this internally? Who's going to buy the Bitcoin? Who's going to put it into cold storage? He said, no, I'm just going to buy ETF equivalent. So we're starting to see situations like that where people formerly maybe weren't having the experience, the understanding to get that exposure. Now they can in their regular accounts. So 3 great graphics here from HODL 15 Capital. If you guys are not following this account on X, I would highly encourage it. Probably one of my favorite accounts after yours, of course, Anthony. This is a close second here. 3 great graphics. So on the right, we've got inflows or outflows. You'll note 4 days now of consecutive green inflows, $187 million on the 17th or yesterday. Fairly significant. So we can talk through that. Then, Anthony, you like to compare production versus, I guess, demand. So we've got a chart in the top left here showing since January 10th, when the ETFs launched, the number of Bitcoin that they've mined publicly versus the number of Bitcoin that the ETFs have purchased. So you can see quite a spread there. And then finally, Anthony, the presence of game theory and nation states getting involved either through confiscation or purchasing. But we're starting to see a number of big players on the global stage at a nation state level adopting the Bitcoin standard as well. So 3 great visuals. I'll let you pick which order you go through, Anthony, but curious to get your thoughts here.
Yeah, no, it's good graphics by HODL 15 Capital. So thanks for supplying those. The interesting thing for me that stood out straight away was the amount of Bitcoin that had been bought by the ETFs since the launch on the January the 10th this year. And if you look at that there, it's literally close to double the amount of Bitcoin that's been mined this year. So we talk about how much Bitcoin is available to buy. And we've seen many charts that say something in the region of 71% of all Bitcoin hasn't moved in the last 2 years. So people, I can personally say I've never sold any Bitcoin. I've added to my Bitcoin, but I've never sold any Bitcoin in the last 4 years. And so, I'm one of those 71% of people. So what it means is you're narrowing down the actual people that are interested in selling Bitcoin. So, yes, there will be sellers for every price. But when you're buying that much, that's a significant inflow of Bitcoin. Suppose surprising by the number of states that there's only so many on there. I mean, bear in mind there's 250 countries in the world, and you've got probably about 10 on that sheet there, and really only sort of 5 or 6 that have got any sort of balances. We'd like to see that number increase, but interestingly, like with the US and China, you can expect both of those countries to have significant balances on the grounds that they've probably confiscated a lot of their Bitcoin through illegal activities, maybe. So we know the US balance hasn't been bought through the Treasury. It's been Bitcoin that's been confiscated from individuals that have been doing nefarious things with their businesses. And you would imagine in China as well, they had a Bitcoin ban. So whether they've also done the same there. The UK one, 61,000, that'd be interesting. Again, I'd say, Bitcoin confiscated from criminals. The Ukraine may be slightly different.
Probably donations to the Ukraine, I would imagine.
Probably donations to the war effort there, so that would be slightly different. El Salvador, certainly, and Bhutan, where Bhutan is, obviously very much spearheading some big Bitcoin operations over in that country. And we've already got the likes of Bitdeer from our group operating over there and only looking to grow over there as well. They've got a 500 megawatt site that they're building out at the moment. Yep. El Salvador was the first country to adopt Bitcoin as its currency. And they're very much proactive there. The president is regularly on many news channels, basically saying how much that the stability, the economic stabilities that Bitcoin has helped the company achieve. And they've been constantly buying small amounts. Bear in mind, it is a small country, El Salvador, and it doesn't seem like a lot of Bitcoin. But when you've got over 5,000 Bitcoin, and the value of Bitcoin today at 59,000, it's a significant amount for a country to hold of that size. I mean, the UK is probably, in terms of population size, maybe 15, 20 times bigger. So you could put that in perspective. That amount that El Salvador has is probably a bigger percentage per population than the UK element or the Ukraine element, or even the China and the US element, to go that far as well. So,
and a note on El Salvador, Anthony. If you guys are unfamiliar with what's been happening there in terms of the turnaround in not only adopting the Bitcoin standard, but public policy, crime rates, standard of living, cost of living, immigration. There's so much going on there under this new leader. Just got reelected for the second term. I was just talking to my family about this. Really a shining example of how Bitcoin can help, at least to validate and turn around a country that was in distress. Anthony, one quick question for you. Oh, great. Sebastian's here as well. Hey, Sebastian, how you doing? One quick question for you, Anthony. This was something the CEO brought up yesterday as well, actually. If so many people are buying Bitcoin right now, like the ETFs, like all of these whales we're seeing, El Salvador, all the retail investors, how is the price not moving? We've started to hear a lot of, I guess, rumors at this point that there's been paper Bitcoin being exchanged, and maybe there aren't full visibility. There's suppression of the market. There's manipulation going on. Do you think there's credibility to any of this, or how can we be seeing this much demand, limited supply, and a sideways price?
I think we just have to, think of all the macroeconomic things that are happening as well around the world at the moment. They will be impacting not just the Bitcoin price, but markets. Also, the impacts of inflation. Also, the fact that effectively a couple of world wars going on. One in Europe and one in the Middle East. And so, these aren't great news stories when you want, stabilized economies to thrive. There's a lot of economies, helping the likes of Ukraine at the moment. We're talking, billions and billions of dollars are going from some of these Western countries to help Ukraine, to stop any further invasion from Russia. So, there's lots of macroeconomic metrics that will impact the Bitcoin price. We've seen that. We've seen the Bitcoin price sometimes follow the Nasdaq in terms of its rises and falls. And bear in mind, I was just thinking about this yesterday. If we go back to 2020, the Bitcoin price started to sort of like go on a rise in the latter part of 2020, and then all the way through the very early part of 2021. So again, when people are thinking about the bull cycle, I think we're probably still maybe a month or so before that sort of like kicks in, if it's going to follow the previous cycle. Because I remember it was 4 years ago when I sort of got into Bitcoin myself and bought my first amount of Bitcoin, which was obviously a lot lower than the price today. But I've seen it rise all the way up to 69,000, didn't sell any, saw it all the way fall back down to 15, didn't sell any then, and just seen it rise over that sort of last 19, 20 months with slow but sure going in the right direction. So I think we're maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks away from where we were in 2020 when that cycle started to occur, because I bought Marathon stock for a few dollars, and then in early 2021, literally, not more than 4, 5, 6 weeks later, it was worth, I don't know, more than 5, 6 times that amount. And I didn't really know what I'd bought. So I bought it on a recommendation from somebody, and didn't really know too much about Bitcoin mining, but it got me intrigued, and I'm grateful that I did buy the stock, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be sat here today.
Yeah, I'm grateful you did too. The nice thing about what you're saying there, Anthony, is that's really supported by that inflation adjusted all-time high graphic that we talked about this week. Basically saying, if you look at the inflation adjusted price of Bitcoin, we have not yet hit an all-time high in this cycle, therefore maybe delaying the start of that. Sebastian looks like he concurs. Now, this is a really nice segue into Fed rate decision. So you talk about macro factors impacting the price of Bitcoin, Anthony. This is definitely one. So Fed rate decision, this is huge for so many reasons, not just Bitcoin, obviously interest rates and mortgage rates and savings rates and trade and all the rest. This is going to be announced this afternoon, actually. This is a 2-day meeting that's wrapping up 2 p.m. Eastern time. They come out with their decision. Most people are expecting 25 to 50 basis points. A quarter to 0.5%. Most of the large cryptos, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin, they're holding up well. The problem is this going to lead to a big rally, or is this going to be a sell the news situation? That's $1 million question. That's the one that we had during the halving and all this other drama during the year. Anthony, big rate decision. You have said you think it'll probably be in that 0.25, 0.5 range as well. What do you think Bitcoin's going to do as a result?
I'm not sure there'll be a massive impact on Bitcoin, and I think it will be a small amount. I think it'll be 0.25, only on the grounds that the UK haven't decided to increase their reduce their interest rates, and inflation in the UK is at the same rate as it is in US. It's, I think, that, or certainly in Europe, I think 2.2% inflation, where it's been steady now for a couple of months. So, I saw that. I'm holding my feet to the fire.
You're getting close to some price future predictions here, Anthony.
Wearing my Freedom by 40 head today. No, please, for any technical analysis, we have some great guests that we've had on the channel. So we've got Freedom by 40, and there's a good few others out there as well.
You can be Freedom by 50, Anthony. We'll make you a new account.
Freedom by 60. I've got 18 months to go, so that would be the.
Oh no, you just had your 35th birthday there, buddy, not too long ago.
No.
Great.
I don't think we'll have a big move today. I think there's an expectation that rates will drop. And I think the closer we're getting to the announcement, I think the more and more people are thinking it's going to be 0.25. Maybe if it's 0.5, that gives it a bit of a push, because that will send a message out that we are starting to see recovery, and we need that stability. I mean, it's impacting on anyone that's borrowing at the moment, or got a sort of like a mortgage deal that's due for renewal, and they've been used to paying 3%, and now it's like over 6%. Then that's the challenge for that when you're trying to find when your mortgage payments double overnight, and we've seen that in the UK, because interest rates. My son, he bought a property 3 years ago, and he was able to get, I think it was just over 2% interest rate, which is really good for a first time buyer. And he was initially going for a 2-year deal, and I said to him at the time, Matthew, I said, why don't you just look at a 5-year deal, just to give you that freedom of knowing what your payment's going to be for 5 years? And he went back to I'm not being funny, it was fractionally different. It was like maybe a couple of pounds extra a month. The interest rate was only slightly worse, but I just said to him, I said, just bite the hand off. And he's really grateful for taking that decision, because now the rates a year ago, were double what he was paying initially. So he's got another just over 2 years and 2 months before he has to make a decision, and hopefully in that period we'll see rates come down to make it more affordable for him to get another decent mortgage rate when it comes up for renewal. But
we have ours up next month, in November, Anthony, and same thing. We locked in on a 5-year fixed. I will always go fixed, not variable on mortgages. That's personal advice, but I'm hoping to see this come down as well. So, I think it's worth taking advice if your mortgage is coming up for renewal, because if there's an expectation in the next 18 months that rates will drop, by, I don't know, say 0.75, 1.5%, then having a variable rate for a year or a year and a half while those rates come down, then locking in a long-term rate, then might be beneficial for those people that have got a rate coming up now. So I wouldn't be sort of like instantly looking now to lock in a new rate. It's a bit like in UK at the moment, our utility charges are significantly higher than probably most of Europe and the rest of the world, and they're starting to. Well, in fact, they've just gone up, or they're going up in October,
And people are saying, should we lock in like that? And actually, the advice now is not to lock in because they think that rates will come down in the future, and therefore just to hang on, have that little bit of pain for a little bit longer, and then you can maybe able to get a better lock-in rate than you could at the moment. So it's worth that. Mortgage is a lot longer. I mean, you lock in your utility for maybe 1 or 2 years, but for mortgages, the standard now is, I mean, UK mortgages between 25 and 35 years. So it's, and with a generation behind me at the moment, it's really hard. Yeah. And someone's just locked in for 30-year fixed at 4. I mean, just before COVID, US rates were like, you could get under 30-year under 3%.
We have a 2% on one house is 1.89.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Anthony, I just wanted to mention, we'll come back to this one, but Anthony, make sure I remember this one. When we get onto the Wulf slide, Paul Prager did put out an interesting tweet today in relation to that $30 billion HPC AI announcement from the hyperscalers. So you can pull that tweet up, maybe, Anthony, Paul Prager, and we can talk to that when we get to the Wulf slide. I just didn't want to forget that one.
Sure.
Last quick slide here for you guys, a plug for Amsterdam. Ticket prices have gone up slightly. We still have the 10% discount. Anthony, Aaron, and I are there Monday to Sunday. We've actually had a couple of viewers in the Amsterdam region already reach out. We were able to get them tickets, and we're going to be meeting up with them at the event. If you're going to be at the event, great. If you're not, that's okay too. We're still in town. We're happy to go out for a coffee or beer or dinner or whatever you want to do. And we'd love to see you there. Now, Anthony, moving into the company specific slides, because I know we're excited to talk through these today. We've brought along some of your tables and charts from your most recent Compass article. So these are going to be looking at August production. We also have an individual slide for each company, so we can talk through some of the specifics we've seen in the last few days here. This one, though, a great overall summary to take a look at some of the key metrics for the previous month. Maybe you can walk us through this one.
Yeah, no, this is a slide that highlights effectively, most of the sort of like the metrics. So it tells you the hash rate, tells you operational hash rate, what was mined, the HODL, how much they've sold, how much they mine per exahash. So it's a great table to highlight all sort of like 15 miners in one space. Standouts, obviously, Marathon's still producing the most Bitcoin, and you can understand that. I mean, they're operating at 35.2 exahash is what they've got installed, but they actually achieved their highest average operational hash rate this month for 33.3. So they're getting closer to working at 100% capacity in terms of what's been plugged in. So we'll keep an eye on that. Hopefully that keeps getting closer each month. But yeah, significant amount when you consider, they're up front there. And then if you look at CleanSpark, the next biggest miner in terms of Bitcoin mined, they delivered 478 Bitcoin, and with a hash rate of 22.6 and an operational hash rate of 21.3. Now, Riot have the second largest hash rate as at the end of August. We know that since then CleanSpark have added more to their hash rate. They've got 23.5 hash rate. They're two facilities. They've got the Rockdale facility and the Corsicana site. Now they've installed a lot of machines, and it looks like they're still curtailing quite a lot. So their operational hash rate for the month of August actually went down slightly from where it was in July. But I'm really hoping that September's update is going to show a real vast improvement. So, I'm banking on sort of like this last 4 months of the year for Riot is to really start getting in the game and really start bashing out some really good production updates. We've seen the green shoots these last three or 4 months. They've started to improve what they're delivering. We've seen firsthand. We've been to the facility at Corsicana. We can only give that sort of like a glowing report from our trip down there in June. And so the expectation now is to start delivering. Now, they did deliver in terms of power sales and demand response credits about $6.4 million during the month of August, which effectively that equates to about 109, 110 Bitcoin. So if you looked at where they finished in terms of production, 322, and then add 100 and 110, so that's like 432. And you're in the sort of ballpark then of where Core Scientific and CleanSpark are in terms of delivering, close to where you should be. Now, it's not extra Bitcoin itself, but it is an equivalency. They are getting a reduced energy cost for that. And we could see from their updates that the energy cost that they're achieving over both sites is really, really low. Probably the lowest of all the big North American miners out there. And I include Cypher in that. And they've got a really good PPA agreement at 2.7. So Riot are doing a lot of things well, but we still have, we still want to see that production increase. And I think if you look at that picture there, that's a great update picture showing that the small section to be completed is building B2. So if you look at the building to the left is building A1 and A2. That's fully completed, fully energized, all working. Then go across to the other side, and the furthest part away of the building there, they've actually completed building B1. And it looks like they're already sort of 25% of the infrastructure done for building B2. Now, what they're doing first is they're putting the outside structure up, and then they will do the ground once that structure's up there, because if there's any inclement weather and you've got your outside structure up, you can then work while it's raining, so it's not going to reduce any time. They're on a very tight ship to get to their target of 36 exahash by the end of the year, but I've got full belief that they'll achieve that because, looking at that site there now, they're working round the clock. It's a 24-hour shift pattern. They've got, people working through nights to deliver this, and they've got over 500 and people working on site. So you can just see by the number of cars there, and how big that site is. And we spent a day there, and that pool in the distance looks small, but believe you me, I wouldn't like to swim across it. It would take a fair chunk of time to get across that.
It's filled up quite a bit since we were there too. I was going to say, Anthony, I almost think I see you and me waving off in the distance there, swimming in the pool. Now, other
your armbands.
Hey, one other interesting point here, you guys. If you look along the exterior of the building, those big, they almost look like sea cans or something. Those are V coolers or V chillers. That's actually where the immersion fluid will get out of the building, and it'll get cooled in those. So just a reminder, this is 100% immersion cooled facility. We had a great special with Rousseau on the channel talking about some of the benefits of immersion as well. So I would encourage you guys to take a look at that one. So Riot, good update there, Anthony. Now I'll jump back to the main table. We can kind of use this as our hub, and then we can branch out from here. Any other focal points from this table before we break into the individual metric graphs?
Yeah, I mean, this is summarized. Got a lot of the graphs that are summarized on here, so it's a one-stop place to look at there. I would go across the bottom line where it's got the day-on-day change. Now we know that in August the difficulty increased, and also Bitcoin price dropped through the month. So both of those things impact the terms of revenues, but day-on-day change from a mining perspective shows that a lot of these miners, because it was August, because it's warm weather, no matter where you are, even in Canada, we spoke to Sheldon, they were still curtailing. So there's a lot of curtailment in that bottom line there. But actually, there are a few, there's the likes of IREN who stand out, because IREN actually increased their total installed hash rate from 10.5 to 16 during the month of August. Well, actually, I'm going to say it was the 4th of September they actually got to 16. And since then, I think they're at 18.8 as we speak. They put out another update this week to say they've gone even higher. So they're very, very close to their 20 exahash by the end of September. So I fully expect them to achieve that. Then they've got another 10 exahash to roll out between October the 1st and the end of the year. And judging by the way they've attacked the last 3 months, where they've gone from 10 to 20, I think that's a done deal as well. I mean, I've been very vocal about that. So, in terms of IREN, in terms of Riot, and I'm going to include CleanSpark in that group as well. Now, those three miners, I fully expect to get their hash rate to their targets
Anthony, on IREN, while we're here, I just flipped over to their page as well. We talked about those H200 GPUs yesterday. What do you make of this business mix? The forecasted 10% revenue coming from AI cloud. Do you feel like that is enough for IREN compared to, say, a Core Scientific? Do you think there's an appetite to bring that number up next year? Or do you think they're pretty comfortable with kind of the 90-10?
Right. So let's be clear that this is a different model to the one that Core Scientific are implementing. So you can't really compare or contrast what IREN and what Hive Digital are doing, and to a certain extent what Bit Digital are doing as well. Bit Digital is probably closer to this model than it is to the Core Scientific. Core Scientific is effectively, we have a site, we have power available, and if you want to put your GPUs into that site, we'll build the site specifically or refurbish the site specifically so that your GPUs can go in there, but you need to negotiate your deal for energy with the energy provider and take the risk on when there's downside in terms of curtailment. And what this is here, what IREN, Hive Digital and Bit Digital are doing is they're buying GPUs to deliver a service. And so customers will come on and buy elements of that service that's up and running. So they'll have all these GPUs that are processing, learning and educational, whatever the data requirements are, and people can go in and buy that power in terms of computer power to deliver what they require. And IREN can deliver it because they've got the GPUs, and the other two have got GPUs as well. But these GPUs are so expensive. I mean, they've talked about how much they're paying for these GPUs. I mean, we're talking tens of millions. In fact, it says there 1,080 of the latest generation H200s at $44 million. This is not small amounts of money. I mean, $44 million in terms of buying hash rate will get you at least potentially 2 to 2.5 exahash of the latest S21 mining machines for this company. So they believe that it's a great model to have. And 33 million, bear in mind, they've talked about there at the moment, they're at 15 million. So this is more than doubling their current there. But interesting, if you look at the Bitcoin mining and how much that's going to deliver with their energy costs, they're going to have an efficient fleet of like 15 joules a terahash. They will be number one. I don't care what the other miners bring in, but they'll be at 15 for a long time before anybody else gets fairly close to that figure, because they've literally changed the whole fleet. And that's how they're managing to go up quickly now. It's not a case of they're having to build all these extra facilities to install these new miners. They're just replacing these old inefficient miners for the latest models that take up the same space but actually deliver more than twice the power and hash rate. So you can have a facility that was delivering 1 exahash that could now potentially deliver 2 to 2.5 exahash by just replacing miners with a more efficient fleet, but as long as you've got the power to support that facility. But that's really impressive from the Bitcoin mining there. Looking at the profit in terms of gross margin of 304 million on revenue of 460 million, and we know that these miners will, have to start keeping their G&A costs down and start delivering some real profits for shareholders to see. So that's positive. And the AI there, I mean, if they're going to spend $44 million, that $44 million isn't included in the illustration below there. So that's still got to be effectively recovered. Now, they are raising capital through the ATM process to raise that capital that they've used to buy those H200s. But effectively, depreciation is the cost that will recover that cost for them. So, there's no depreciation in that figure there. And if these machines last 3 years, I mean, Dan's been very clear that it takes at least 2 years to recover the capital expended on the H100s. I don't know what the figure will be like on the H200s. But nobody knows how long these GPUs have a life of. Is it 3 years? Exactly. Is it 4 years? Yeah. Can they eke out a bit more if they look after them, if they're in better conditions? What are they going to use to keep them cool? Is it air cooled? Are they going to do liquid cooled? So again, lots of little questions to ask. But from that table there, I quite like the illustration there because it highlights, for me, the margins, appropriate margin. And we've already said that at the beginning of the podcast, what they're delivering on their AI. It was way over 90%, and they're saying 90% here, but they're achieving 98% in August. So.
Well, and that'll change a lot based on Bitcoin price here as well. Two other quick comments here. We'll do a 2-for-1 for you here. Ganga, financial operational data. We just did actually 2 videos talking about balance sheet, going through all the Q2 earnings, most recent earnings from all these companies. So make sure you check that one out.
And profit. We went through revenue as well.
The full meal deal there. And then secondly, what is your take on the Kingdom of Bhutan holding and the Bitdeer price impact? So I'm going to jump over to Bitdeer, Anthony. We saw in that initial slide, Bitdeer is one of really 2 key countries alongside El Salvador that's purchasing Bitcoin opposed to confiscating it. What do you take of Kingdom Bhutan and the impact on Bitdeer as they've partnered on that project? And this is obviously a key development or growth opportunity for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, they are partnered into these deals, and it won't just be with Bitdeer. There'll be other operators out in Bhutan who are using that excess renewable energy to deliver Bitcoin mining, and the government will be getting their share of that. So it's great to see that they're keeping it in their treasury, and the expectation that it grows, in value. And they're in a better position. It's also like, in fact, it's effectively like inflation proof. So, but it's really good to see. And just hopefully we get more countries like that. I mean, you could argue, why an Iceland, Sweden, Norway, where there are Bitcoin mining facilities there, why aren't they also tapping into this asset class and and sort of like delivering more? But it's as I say, from their perspective, it's positive. They're really behind it. Bitdeer have got a big facility out there that they're going to expand, a 500 megawatt facility. So, they've got, as a miner, Bitdeer have got some of the largest power available. And we're not just talking pipeline power; we're talking power at sites that they are now developing, not aspirational development in 2, 3, 4 years' time. They are developing these sites. They're developing Bhutan. They're developing Norway. They're developing 2 or 3 sites in the US. So there's they're doing things at once. And I said before, the challenges is is capital for Bitdeer. That's the only sort of downside is they're a non-US company, so it's raising capital. They've been very good this year. They raised capital through Tether. They raised capital through this convertible note that you can see on the screen there. So that's like the best part of 300 million. They've got 150 million of an ATM in place. So the likelihood is that, you will see probably further ATMs if they're going to deliver all what they've said they've promised to deliver, then they'll probably utilize more of that. But that gives them, we're already talking there close to 400 million in extra capital raised this year in terms of 3 levers. Plus they sell their Bitcoin on a fairly regular basis. So they don't hodl Bitcoin. So that money that goes in there covers their operational requirements and also goes towards helping with their capital requirements. The self-mining business at the moment, and I say that at the moment, is a small part of their business, probably about 40%. They have a hosting business, which is a lot bigger than their self-mining business. They have a cloud hash rate business, which is very profitable. They have they've started an AI project just with a couple of megawatts at the moment in Singapore, but that's going to increase significantly. They've also announced, they're going to build their own mining machines, and it's like what can they not do at the moment? The Seal Miner A1 has already been tested, and that's going out for production. And we should start seeing some of those rigs coming in Q4, which will get them to their target around about 12 exahash by the end of the year. And then into 2025, they've got a couple of more versions of the Seal Miner come out. So they've got the Seal Miner A2, Seal Miner A3, and we're looking at significant efficiency as you go through the various generations of these miners.
Yeah.
And they've got an aspirational miner that's really, that's like, single digit efficiency. So yes, everyone needs an aspiration in life, and they've got one. It shouldn't come as too much of a shock to most people, because Bitdeer, we've talked about many times, actually came from Bitmain. So the actual CEO of Bitdeer was the co-founder of Bitmain, so Jihan Wu. And, many of the team of Bitdeer were previously Bitmain. So when they split off and became Bitdeer, a chunk of Bitmain was split off as well. So, and quite a few of those guys were sort of like R&D guys. So Bitdeer have something like about 50 people working in R&D.
Yeah. Anthony, they almost had 49 after you took the one guy out at the event in Nashville there. When we got the picture with the Bitdeer team, Anthony put his arm up around the poor guy and elbowed him right in the ear. He almost took the R&D team down to 49, Anthony.
Nearly. That's the main point in that sentence. Nearly. Not quite, but he was okay after he came out of hospital 3 days later.
Sure.
The bells had stopped ringing, and he could see just one person instead of 6 in front of him. And he couldn't pick me out of a lineup, because when they put the lineup there, he couldn't. There's only 6 in the lineup, but he could see 36. So he was like,
hey, who needs 2 ears? Hey, you only need one nose. You can get by with one ear. Anthony, we're up to 75 concurrent viewers, you guys. So here's the deal. These tables help you out. Giving us likes and shares helps us out. So hit the like button, you guys. Let's get this going over 100 here. Anthony, I'm going to move into your second table, talking about Bitcoin mined in August. So again, this is available in Compass Mining. This is your most recent article. Really excited about that partnership with Compass. Walk us through here, Anthony. I know you mentioned Marathon with the top performance in the month of August, 673 Bitcoin. Fairly impressive. Anyone else on this table stand out?
Yeah, I mean, we can see the likes of IREN are moving up the table now. So, you go back a couple of years ago, IREN would probably somewhere around about where Gryphon are at the moment on there in terms of what the hash rate was a couple of years ago. I think it was down at like 1.7 exahash. But what we've seen in the last sort of, 12, 18 months has been really, really impressive. I mean, they're at 18.2 or 18.8 exahash as we speak today. They'll get to 20 by the end of the year, at the end of the month, and then 30 by the end of the year. So that monthly production for IREN will start to start catching up with the likes of Riot and Core Scientific. We'll see Riot also improve. So we talked about them extensively. Their numbers will start going up. Cores has said they're not going to increase their fleet by much more between now and the end of the year, maybe another exahash, but they will improve the efficiency. So that will help their production later in the year if those machines from Block start coming in there. Wulf, they're going to get to about 13 exahash. So they've got their production should improve a little bit between now and the end of the year. Bitdeer, again, same as Wulf, they're going to increase their hash rate to 12. So again, they'll be on the tails of Wulf there. Hive, well, Hive have announced Paraguay. So
oh, sorry, buddy. There we go.
What we don't know about Hive is what they're going to achieve this year now. So at the start of the year, they actually had a forecast of 8 by the end of the year. They're around about 5.5 exahash at the moment. We know when they finish in Paraguay, that's going to go up to, I think, 13.5. So they've got about another 8 exahash to get online. Now, some of that exahash may come on in stages, just like some of these other sites we've talked about, Corsicana, Childress, where you start building some of these buildings and switching them off as you build the next building. So we might see Hive. Hopefully, we'd like to see them get to that sort of 8 exahash by the end of the year, which is where their target was. But they're also fully driving HPC. Hut, well, we don't know what Hut are doing self-mining at the moment. We're hoping that they're going to, get a deal for some new miners to come in and, start improving there. But what we've seen from Hut in terms of self-mining just seems to be going backwards a little bit in terms of they've not grown any hash rate. They're using an aging fleet. It's over 30 joules a terahash, which is sort of like, one of the lowest efficiencies in terms of, not in a good way. It's a poor efficiency compared to their miners. But one thing Hut have got that other miners have got is they've got really cheap energy. So they've also got energy at around about 3 cents or 3.1 cents a kilowatt hour. And that puts them in that sort of like top echelon, along with the likes of Cypher, likes of Riot, the likes of Soluna. Even TeraWulf now, their average price for August was about 4.5 cents. So Hut have got a cheaper electricity price than TeraWulf, and so that will obviously account for a little bit of the fact that they've got an inefficient fleet, because you need both to be working. But actually, if you've got a cheap energy price, it means you can use less efficient miners to deliver a margin. So, hopefully when we see their updates, they start, they'll show that price in there and the fact that they're getting a margin. We want to see an update from them saying, here's an order we've made on some machines, and we're coming towards the end of that Q3 period now for Asher, and he said, judge me on Q3. So we're literally 2 weeks away from the end of Q3. So then we start judging Asher on his performance for the year of 2024 year to date.
Gotcha. We'll move into the utilization slide here. Ryan, I don't think it was you calling, buddy. My neighbor's throwing on a brisket. We got a new smoker out back, so we're going to do a brisket tonight. Ryan's going out to Elbow Falls. Anthony, interestingly enough, see, this is why I include this slide.
Yeah,
this is right near where we were going out off-roading the other weekend, Anthony. So going out hiking, biking in Elbow Falls. That's the McNallie Money Roadster. You guys have just added the rooftop tent this year. So Anthony always wonders why I have this slide in here. That's exactly why, Anthony. In case there's any way I can incorporate it into the discussion, I will definitely try and do so. Moving along to utilization. So observation here, Anthony, that you brought up last time, the spread on this chart is getting a lot more narrow. Companies are refining their businesses. They're getting better at what they do, keeping these machines humming and hashing all day long. Gryphon 101%. How does that work out, Anthony?
Right. So when you look at Gryphon's update, they use one word in the update, which sort of probably gives them a little bit of allowance here. They actually mined, I think it was approximately 20 Bitcoin. So
gotcha.
Now that could be 19.5 or it could be higher than 20, but we don't know the exact amount. I will ask them to put in the more exact amount for the next month, because we shouldn't really be seeing miners. It is possible to achieve 101% utilization, because what we've seen before is, and maybe Gryphon, don't want to say they haven't been, but some of the mining companies have maybe underclocking their mining machines and getting better results from them. So we know that Core Scientific have utilized that process. We certainly know that Hive Digital did this month. So Hive Digital, by underclocking some of their older miners, were able to achieve a fleet efficiency of 23 instead of where it should have been at 24.5. And that means that you're saving significant amounts of energy to deliver the same sort of like Bitcoin. So Gryphon, I mean, in all honesty, Gryphon were quite high last month as well. So let's say they're very close to 100%.
And on the topic of Gryphon, Anthony, I'll bring up their page as well. We can speak to them a little bit just as they came in first here. They also came out with that big announcement in terms of very low cost power, 1 cent power, bringing them up, I think, surpassing that single exahash milestone. So great update from Rob and the team at Gryphon, but it does look like that 6 exahash target or modified target at least is still a little bit out of reach this year, hey?
Yeah, and I think at the start of the year, I think they were even quoting 10 as a sort of like an aspirational target, which we looked like, long and hard trying to realize how they could get there. I mean, if you sort of like all the smaller Bitcoin miners added together, then yeah, we could see it happening that way. So the likes of Soluna and SATO and DMG and Gryphon, if those miners and a few of the other ones, became one miner and tried to save on some of the costs associated, so you don't need 5 HR departments or 5 finance departments. You could cut down costs against that. You don't need 5 CEOs either, so there'd be a challenge to see who would run the company and who would get what part. But we've seen mergers and acquisitions from some of the bigger miners, so why not some M&A activity with some of these smaller ones? And I think Rob was very open to that sort of conversation. He's looked at, I think, 20 to 25 realistic, credible pieces of work that they've done some due diligence on. So they are doing a lot of work on that. But yeah, they've got this small, it's only a few megawatts of power at that 1 cent. So it's not like it's going to change their whole cost of mining. I mean, I think the site they've got at the moment, I'm not sure it's 28 megawatts. So it would only be a small percentage of what they're delivering, but it's still a great rate to get. And you know, if you can get as many of these small rates, that's the whole deal. Get the cost down to 1 cent, and you're in the game that's winning, because
For sure it is.
It's all about getting the power cost down. You get the power cost down to really low, or even zero. We've talked about, in the future, maybe having zero energy costs are going to be the ones that win the game, because as difficulty increases consistently, as these new mining companies bring on more and more machines, and that hash rate goes up, difficulty increases. The only thing you've got to play with then is the actual power cost. And so it's getting that power cost down. And we've seen some of the big CEOs turn around and say in 3 or 4 years' time, it's got to be effectively either the power companies running Bitcoin mining, or you've got companies that are able to get zero cost or zero, and it could be some of these where there's stranded energy. It's not going to anyone's use there, so maybe the miners can tap into stranded energy, and we've seen some of them do that and get it for really low. Soluna are able to tap into energy that's stranded, and they're only paying 3 cents a kilowatt hour, so that makes their projects really viable. So that's great for that company.
Yeah, most definitely is. Now, Anthony, I wanted to jump over to TeraWulf next. 23 here. Great. Interesting tweet this morning by Paul Prager. I don't know if you had a chance to pull it up yet or not, Anthony. I'll bring it up on my phone and I can just read it aloud for everyone. Highly speculated that TeraWulf may be the next company to announce a deal with a hyperscaler. We just saw some big investment in the AI HPC sector overall. Paul basically saying that they've got the power, they have the assets, have the expertise to make it happen. What do you make of this? Is that I guess, intuition of something to come?
Yeah, I think it's more than speculation now. I think we've seen enough. We saw in Nashville, there was quite a few people talking about, TeraWulf being potentially the next miner to announce a big deal. And we've even had Patrick came on the podcast recently, wouldn't talk about any growth in hash rate next year, but was more than happy to talk about all the things they're endeavoring to deliver, a HPC capability. And so they've got, great facility at Lake Mariner there. And they've got the size and the space to build out some buildings for HPC. They can raise the amount of power there as well. So they've got further opportunities to expand what they've currently got. At the moment, I think it's around about 240 megawatts there that they're operating with, but they've got the opportunity to raise that there with the provider, and effectively, Beowulf is a provider, which is a company owned by Paul Prager. So you'll have to have a chat with himself to make sure that goes through okay. But no, I think I said before many times, I think it's, you've got to look at TeraWulf or Cypher. Both of them are geared up. Both of them are great at building data centers. They've got a great history of building data centers. So I think, one of those two mining companies will decide. And we put the question to Tyler of Cypher, would you change the Black Pearl site, which is currently geared up to deliver a significant amount of Bitcoin mining, self-mining next year, if the right deal came through? And he went, absolutely. So, he's more than happy to deliver a HPC on a site that has been utilized for Bitcoin mining.
Well, like you said, everyone has a price, right? And these are public companies. They have a duty to shareholders to create value. So if there's an offer on the table, obviously you have to entertain it. Production exahash.
Yeah, the one thing you can say about this slide is really it's so close now, and it should be so close. To be honest with you, all these miners should be at the same level, because you all get rewarded for the hash rate that you have on the actual global hash rate. So there's very limited difference between what one pool gives you to the next pool. It's very competitive. We can see from the likes of those companies that aren't really achieving, and as to why. So Core Scientific haven't been, and again, this will be probably curtailment in Texas, the hot weather. They use air cool, so they'll be switching off when it's hot weather. Also, maybe when the price of the electricity rises, they switch off for that reason there. Same with some of the other miners as well. Marathon as well will do that. But if you look, effectively, once you get to Bitdeer and all the way to SATO technology, you were able to achieve 22.73 in terms of their very small hash rate. I think they only mined about 10, 11 Bitcoin for the month. So it wasn't a single amount of Bitcoin. They've got one facility. I think it's just over 20 megawatts. So it's just managing everything on one site there. They had a bit of an issue with they had a fire in June. So that's why the operating side of the facility is lower than where it should be by about 20%. But it looks like what they're doing with 80% of their mining machines that are available at the moment is they're delivering, a reasonable amount of Bitcoin per machine. So those in Gryphon would expect to be up there with the utilization that we just saw on the last graph there. Wulf had a good month. CleanSpark jumped up there. Now, we normally talk about Bitfarms and Hive, and they sort of like came in at 5th and 6th this month. But actually, if you look at the Bitfarms and Hives compared to the top 3, we're talking, very small percentages difference there. You're looking at a fraction of a Bitcoin, and it makes all the difference. So this is what we the theory of mining and mining production by exahash. Every miner should have been around 22.4, 22.5. That's the deal. And 10 or 12 of those miners are within very small margins of that. There's only a couple of miners on there that you'd have a concern.
Anthony, you mentioned pools, the impact of pools. Do you think now that companies like CleanSpark and Riot are getting targets in the 30, 40, 50 exahash range, are we going to start to see other companies create their own pool like Marathon? Or do you think it's just really not lucrative enough to warrant the additional work?
I think there's potentially a risk with your own pool if there's only you utilizing it. Marathon their pool was built by Sheldon from DMG, and we know DMG with their own Terra pool had issues with it when that went live. Marathon, if you look at their production for the last 2 years, there's only been about 3 or 4 months where they've had reasonably good production. But when they have had good production, it's been outstanding. And but the other 20 months of that 2 years, we're scratching our heads. So how much of that 20 months is down to the pool? And sort of like what we class as luck, or is it just down to poor production, or the reasons around production? So curtailment, maintenance, software issues. How much is applied to that there, or how much could they apply to the pool? Now they have, on terms of transaction fees, Marathon have tended to do quite well on transaction fees of late, and they've certainly highlighted the months that they've done really well. But we just don't see a consistency like that. So, I think last month they were top in this ranking. So, and now they've gone from top to sort of, 12 or 13th the following month. We want them to, at least with Bitfarms and Hive, and when we come to the year-to-date position, that will tell you who's the most consistent miners month after month. And that's what you want to see. I mean, it's great having 1 month, but you want to make sure that you've got 9 or 10 similar months in a year. Occasionally every miner will have an issue, and hash rate will drop off for a number of reasons. And like we said, we just announced why SATO's hash rate dropped off there. They had a fire there, so it can happen to any miner. But please, not 9 or 10 months of the opposite, where you have poor months and you've only got a couple of good months a year. That's what shareholders don't want to see, because it's about revenues. You're still paying lots of costs out. So you're still paying all your staff. You're still paying for the facility. Yes, you won't be paying for the energy if you're not switching them on 24/7 for that month itself, but you're still paying every other cost associated with it. So to deliver a contribution to all those staffing costs and all the sort of like the the stock compensation that they want to earn, or paying for all those costs there. You want to make sure you're mining Bitcoin, as much as possible. At least Riot can turn around and say, well, we do switch off with regularity, but you know what? We got 6.4 million. I mean, 6.4 million was more than probably 5 or 6 of those miners had in Bitcoin mining revenue for the month there. So it's not a small amount. Granted, last August, it was 31 million, I think, was last year. So there's nowhere near that. But we were told in July, the weather conditions, even though to the mere mortal like you and me, it would have been hot weather in July and August. But to people living in Texas, it was like, 2 degrees above the Arctic for them, because they were used to 50 degrees, and it probably only got to 47. So, but for me and you,
2 degrees from melting, I think.
We'd have been sat indoors, eating brisket and making sure the air conditioning was on full blast.
Yeah. Now, Anthony, you mentioned both Bitfarms and Hive in your analysis there, so we might as well jump over to those individual slides. We talked about this one yesterday, this hosting agreement with Stronghold. We were supposed to have Ben on the channel this week. We've pushed that out till next week, just due to some travel. Any comments on Bitfarms in addition to what you said on the last slide there?
No, this is just Bitfarms announcing, they've agreed to buy Stronghold. It doesn't happen until next year, so Stronghold still maintains its position on the Nasdaq. Still a stock on there. You can still buy Stronghold stock. The deal's in place now, so everybody knows what they're going to get in terms of the amount of Bitfarms shares compared to Stronghold shares when they're converted. That's been laid down now, so that's not going to change. But because it's not happened now, they're effectively announcing that they're going to use some of their machines to be hosted at that facility. So obviously there'll be like a hosting agreement in there, and they're going to put in 2.2 exahash of machines at that site, which equates to 10,000 of the T21 miners. Now, Ben's been on the channel and talked about the T21. He's very impressed with the T21. They're able to deliver a far better efficiency than is used for some of the other miners they've got on the books. So he was saying, I think it was like 30% higher than the actual box was stating in terms of efficiency, in terms of delivering optimum hash rate. So that's a really good sign. Now, all this is doing here is it's getting them to their target quicker. So this isn't adding to their 21. This is to get to 21. And so unlike Riot, unlike CleanSpark, who basically said our hash rates for both of those companies has increased by 5 exahash with what they've delivered since they announced the original target, Bitfarms are basically saying we're going to put some of the miners into this facility here as hosted miners rather than get them into Paraguay as we earlier anticipated. So there'll be less hash rate in Paraguay, a lot more hash rate, obviously, at this facility here. And it still gets them to 21 by the end of the year. So all eyes on Bitfarms. And we'll get an update from Ben, early next week when we have him on the podcast. We want to know, A, are you getting closer to 12? Will we see 12 in September in terms of, really, that was your sort of like June 30th target. So have you had those machines replaced that weren't operating efficiently that you just bought from Bitmain? B, how close are you going to get to 21? Are we, is Paraguay a bigger issue than been reported? Are there concerns down there, or is it a case of you can deliver this now quickly with this site and do things more in a sort of like a more managed way down in Paraguay, and we get to 21 by the end of the year, but that extra 2 exahash gets installed in early 2023, so it starts the momentum to get to 35, because that's their target for 2025. 21 exahash by the end of 2024, 35 exahash by the end of 2025. And
interesting you bring that up, Anthony, because we actually had a subscriber submit a very similar question saying, hey, we've started to hear some concerns about operating in other countries, Paraguay being one of them. Unstable energy pricing. We're going to come on to Hive next. They've actually announced Paraguay site as well. But the question from the subscriber was, is this a timing thing? Just, hey, there's an opportunity to get this stuff online quicker? Or is this maybe things aren't so rosy in Paraguay and we're changing strategy a little bit here? We'll ask Ben that. We definitely don't want to spread any rumors, but that's the question. Is this a timing or a situational type of decision? Next one up, Anthony, is Hive. We just talked about this one actually in the live, or sorry, in this week's summary as well. So Hive, you mentioned, very similar in terms of production to Bitfarms. In terms of utilization, they came in at 91% for August. So maybe you can just give a couple thoughts on Hive here, and then we can get into our next chart.
Yeah, so utilization, for those that don't understand how that's been calculated, is it looks at what you've got installed, because effectively that's what should be running. If you've got 100 machines installed in the facility, you need to make sure they're all physically switched on and mining. These mining companies now are now telling us, as well as their installed hash rate, they have an operational hash rate. So the way we calculate utilization is we look at what their installed hash rate is. So we'll look at all the miners that they've got plugged in, and we know how many Bitcoin they should have made or produced had all those machines been actually physically working for the period of the month. And then we compare that to what they actually delivered. So utilization will generally, be a lower amount, because the fact that they can't get all the machines operating. And it could be the fact that, when you switch off your machines for curtailment, because it's hot weather, or you're in Texas, they're part of the 4CP plan, so they have to switch off with regularity. It could be an hour a day, an hour and a half a day, every day. So you're told that you have to switch off your mining machines, and you do that. And I know that like Riot on Friday, they had to switch off. I think it was like 4 p.m. Eastern time for 1 hour, and they'll have literally the whole site switches down. They're told in advance when it's going to happen. They agree to it, and there are some benefits from doing it like that. So they can't mine during that hour. So that period affects their utilization. They're not utilization 100% there. So when you look at Riot at 61%, you go, oh my god, it's terrible. Actually, in Riot's case, they got $6.4 million for switching off their machines, and actually in some elements of that was selling the power, but some of them they were rewarded for switching off by the program that they're on there. So they can get that, when they're paying 2.6 cents on average for their energy, people shouldn't be as concerned, because that's a great rate of energy. But Hive here, 91%. They have got something like 5.5 installed hash rate, and they actually had an operational hash rate just under 5, and so they're not quite getting, it's probably about 10% in theory, and if you look at there, it's 91%. So they're delivering with what their operational hash rate is. They are delivering quite a good rate of Bitcoin, and we saw on the previous slide, they're up there again in that top six companies. 22.4, same as Bitfarms, CleanSpark and Wulf, fractionally small percentages. You couldn't even see the percentage. It's that small between those four. And so all delivering about the same amount of Bitcoin, because that's what you expect them to deliver. But utilization will sort of like, basically, those people that want to say we're operating at this level, you can sort of like do well in this table, but if you've got a big amount of miners that you're having to switch off for more than small amounts of time, it highlights in the utilization. You're not utilizing much. Now Gryphon, who actually effectively topped both charts, they were second in this one and top in utilization. It shows that they've only got a small fleet, but they were able to have them switched on for near all the time.
Yeah, that's
where
great.
They're located. I think it's like northeast US, so it's in the sort of like cooler climate. So if we saw the weather in Texas not particularly hot, then I would imagine that they had beneficial weather, probably close to the coast on the east side there. So again, it's good environmental conditions for them to mine, and maybe get the most out of that there. So, and generally Gryphon are sort in that top half group month by month from a mining per exahash. They're not top generally, but they're in the top half of the group. So,
Yeah. Great. Now, moving along, Anthony, the point you just made there is really interesting. Companies have the opportunity to kind of game these metrics, right? Underclocking, overclocking, plugging machines in, unplugging, curtailing. But if you start to look at all of these charts together, Anthony, you can't really hide from all of them, right? So it's important to look at each one of these charts together. We always say, Anthony, never look at a single metric when you make your investing decision. But interesting to see how utilization can really highlight potential opportunities for companies. Now, Bitcoin sold as a percentage of production in August. Again, this one just, I do not understand, Anthony. In an industry like this would be like oil companies where some of them hold all of their oil and some of them sell all their oil and some of them buy oil. And like, it just seems weird to me that there's companies that do the exact same operation, exact same business, exact same product, but completely polar opposite strategies in terms of HODL or not. So walk us through this one. Looks like the majority of companies now are selling the majority of their production.
Yeah. And actually, if you think about miners that hodl versus miners that don't hodl, it's about 50-50. So in terms of the companies selling, I mean, CleanSpark and Riot at 0.5 and 2.2, that amount of sales is part of a remuneration package for directors. So it's not like they physically sold production. It's just that the remuneration package include some of those directors getting paid in Bitcoin from the actual Bitcoin produced. So I think it's like 2.5 Bitcoin for CleanSpark and 7 Bitcoin for Riot is given to directors as part of remuneration. Marathon haven't sold any, and I don't think they've sold any for a few months. They actually bought a big chunk of Bitcoin during the month, and they've also bought since these tables as well. So they're now at 26,200, which is effectively the 26.2 miles is the amount of miles in a marathon. So I think it was Michael Saylor who said, be interesting to see when you get to 26,200. And lo and behold, Fred, listening to somebody else, has managed to go and has gone and done that and got those extra Bitcoin and announced it. So, he's keen to follow that. And it looks like, they're using that strategy as well now. It's it'll be interesting how it turns out. I mean, it hasn't done MicroStrategy any harm. But, we'll certainly be asking Bitcoin miners when they come on for their next interview. So we've got Ben on next week. We've got Jason coming on in a couple of weeks' time. And we'll have then a load of miners coming on probably in sort of like October, November, when we've got earnings coming out. So we'll be asking these questions about buying. But I guarantee a lot of them will come out and say, if we can produce Bitcoin lower than the Bitcoin price, why would we go out there and buy it? So
exactly.
That's the theory for me. But MicroStrategy's whole strategy is about buying as much Bitcoin as they can possibly raise capital to buy. So it's worked for them. They've been given a premium, effectively 100% on their Bitcoin hodl. So whether Marathon think along the same lines, but on Marathon also at the moment being given a premium. So we know that their hodl's worth, I think, in the region of about $1.5 billion. And the value of the company, I think you highlighted earlier, was $4.7 billion.
Yeah.
So are they giving a premium anyway in there? So I don't know if people are expecting it to be a bigger premium than it is, but I'm sure the markets do look at it in the same way from that there.
On MicroStrategy, Anthony, I saw with that most recent 700 million, I think it was upsized raise, their blended interest rate is, I think, 0.89. It's under 1%. They're able to borrow this money for across all of these different loans. So they're essentially taking fiat currency, getting it for free, flipping it to Bitcoin, which is appreciating against fiat. And then on a per shareholder basis, they're just getting more and more Bitcoin per share. So yeah, the playbook is rock solid. And personally, I don't know why more public companies don't have Bitcoin on balance sheet.
Yeah. And I think I'm trying to think what the last time I saw the average price is about 38,000.
Yeah. So phenomenal.
So at the moment, you've got a $22,000 premium on 245,000 Bitcoin in terms of what the value is if they were to sell Bitcoin today. So
yeah, that'll work. Okay,
that certainly works for me. But the market's given them even higher premium from a share price. So I can see why there's quite a lot of people in the mining space who've actually gone into and purchased MicroStrategy. I haven't purchased MicroStrategy, but I do sort of watch the share price, and I do see it in many of the social media platforms that people are very interested in. Good luck to them if they've done the due diligence and they feel it's one for the future. then why not? I'm not here to tell people what to invest in for 1 minute. I mean, I'm, I like to think I know what I'm doing myself, but I won't get people to follow what I invest in. Never mind what other people invest in. I think you need to make this decision yourself, and do your due diligence, and get to understand how these miners perform, what energy rates they're paying, what the efficiency of their fleets are. Are they doing things regularly in a good way? So these tables that we see on a monthly basis, who's up there at the top of the tables? Are these same companies delivering profits? And when you start looking at, say, 6, 7, 8 different ratios covering profitability, covering financial strength in terms of balance sheet, in terms of cash flow, and these same companies coming out the top there, then you can sort of like start thinking, actually, there's something more to this, and I can maybe, look at this for an investment. But don't look at one of these tables and think, I need to go out and buy Marathon because they're not selling any Bitcoin. Because equally, you could turn around and say, I should be buying Cores and IREN because they're selling all their Bitcoin and utilizing it to grow the company. So, there's a different way of looking at these charts. We've seen Gryphon and SATO there selling more than their production. And I'm afraid, when you're selling more of your production, it just means that costs are getting tighter. These are two of the smaller miners. So, there's challenges being small to try and grow and deliver. So, we looked at the energy cost. I think SATO released their energy cost in their update, and it was getting close to the actual Bitcoin price. So from a margin perspective, that's a real challenge there. So, as I say, look at these ratios on here, but do a far more due diligence and look at just these tables. There's a lot more out there, and look at some of my previous articles. I try to highlight, and people have asked, do you do it from profitability? I do a lot of articles covering a lot of different metrics, so if you've read, I think I've had 85 published, you've read majority of those articles, you'd be in a better position just looking at one table.
Anthony, you brought up an interesting point about companies holding Bitcoin for appreciation or investing in their company to fuel growth. We brought up an interesting topic this week talking about the actual value of the fleet. So not only are they investing in the growth in terms of exahash, but if they start buying hundreds of millions of dollars of miners with this Bitcoin revenue and the value of those fleets goes up, as we've seen in previous cycles, that's also a great strategy for the company as well. So like you say, Anthony, there's more than one way to skin a cat, I guess they say. Revenue by energized hash rate. This is one of my favorites. It does a good job of kind of comparing, contrasting apples to oranges. We want to start looking more at megawatts as well as exahash on the channel. And I see some of the comments here, Anthony, talking. We just had one. What was it? From Cyrus here, touch on how much each megawatt worth of HPC is specifically for Wulf. So I don't know if we have that stat available today, but the point being, Anthony, these companies are diversifying their revenue streams. They're using their megawatts in different ways. And it's getting really interesting to start look at the different revenue splits in these companies. IREN is the standout here. We can definitely talk to them and then work through the list.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, IREN, we know IREN from a production point of view, generally a top 4 miner. So again, this is again looks at what you've got in terms of what your plugged in hash rate is and what you're delivering it. And so I also look at for some of these companies. Again, if they've switched off and they're getting energy credits, I take that into account if they've put it into their updates. So actually, Riot do a little bit better in this table because they got that 6.4 million. But it still shows that in terms of what they were able to deliver, including their mining and their power sales, etc., it still put them behind a few of the miners. But again, at the top, you've got the likes of IREN, you've got the likes of Hive and Gryphon, Bitdeer, CleanSpark. But these numbers per month are coming down considerably. I mean, at the start of the year, we were like probably close to $3,000 a petahash. And now we're at sort of, $1,300. So this is where the margins are being cut here. So it's clear. I might try and do some sort of a table that highlights the change of over the year that we've had for petahash from January through to the end of September when I do the next set of tables, just to show the impact of what difficulty does. But yes, we're certainly also looking into doing something in one of my next articles, not the next one, but in an article in the future, to look at megawatts and how miners are now going to deliver revenues from that. So that'd be quite good to do, because that will start incorporating the HPC per megawatt and how much revenue is raised compared to the Bitcoin mining through megawatts and how much is raised through that there. And then also look at the margins for both of those. So you've got some comparisons within companies, and then you can compare companies against each other. Then you can look at the average revenue per megawatt. So a company delivering self-mining and also some hosted mining and some HPC, you'll have a sort of like an average revenue per megawatt that they're utilizing across all their three services.
Gotcha. Yeah, I want to touch on Soluna as well here, Anthony, because that's another one on the table here, actually in last place at $1,011 per energized.
Yeah, I want to say about Soluna. So let me just make this clear. On this table here, the reason they're in last place is because they've had significant curtailment in their self-mining. Their self-mining is really a very small part of their whole business.
So let's touch on that a little bit, Anthony. Yeah. Let's talk, because I know they just announced this new project, Rasa as well. So let's maybe talk about that for people who aren't super familiar with Soluna.
Yeah, so Soluna have, a number of different, so they have self-mining, they have and I'm going to say it's like between 600 and 700 hash rate, but their hosted hash rate is 1.6 exahash, and then they are also delivering some HPC services as well. So the self-mining bit is quite small, so it doesn't give them a true reflection. And actually, at its highest, the self-mining hash rate was probably about 850 petahash. So when you're operating down around the 600 mark, it's a big drop from 850. It might not seem a big drop for the likes of Marathon or Riot or CleanSpark, but for a small company, that sort of drop there, is potentially 20-25%. So when that drops there, you can see the revenue drops as well, because they have the miners, they just haven't been operating with, at the full expectation. So things like utilization will be down for Soluna. And in this revenue per petahash will also reflect. It's very similar to utilization in terms of all these miners. But the positive thing about Soluna is they do these, when I say small projects, the project started at around about the 25 megawatts, say 45 megawatts, 50 megawatts. The last two, we've got Project Catty, 166 megawatts, and we've now got Project Rosa, which is a new 187 megawatt data center, which could be utilized for Bitcoin mining and AI services. Survivor all. It's on a co-located site with 240 megawatts wind farm in Texas, so fully renewable energy in Texas. And they've just secured 60 acres of land there for the development of that project. So this is a really good piece here. Now, what they'll do is they'll look for a partner to come in and sort of like provide the financing to deliver this project. So they've got the site, but obviously your site needs to be developed. And so there'll be, a lot of costs to get the substation in there, start getting the buildings in there, get all the cabling, get all the connections in place. This could take, 12 months, 18 months, and it needs to be paid for. So they'll now, having secured everything from a project perspective, they'll now look for a partner, as they've done with all their other projects. But, you'll see, that'll be happening. There'll be people out there wanting to invest in this. So, Soluna are very good at what they do. And, the companies then will agree some sort of a revenue split once the actual facility is up and running. So just like with Dorothy 2, that has now started in Texas, that site has already broken ground, and they received something like $30 million in advance, which is the cost of delivering the project to its specifications. And then once it's delivered, there'll be a sort of a share of the revenue. Now, if people are sort of like, want to know more about Soluna, I basically tell you, go to the website, go and look at some of their presentation. Their presentation slides are really good. It tells you everything about the company. It tells you all about the projects. It even tells you at sort of like how they're going to deliver each project in the case of a bear case scenario, in case of a more bullish scenario. So they're looking at like, if the price of Bitcoin is this level, if the energy cost is this level. So worth having a look through there before you even contemplate, even think about investing in any company. Do your due diligence. But I think their presentation is really good. It tells you what they're all about. It tells you how they try to drive their revenues. They look at certain criteria to drive revenues from basically every element there. It's all about delivering revenues for the power they've got. They've got a pipeline of up to about 2 gigawatts of power now. They're a small miner. The market capitalization, I think, on one of your early slides, Bryce, was probably around about the $20 million mark. So, in fact, they're $16.92 million. So under $17 million. Now, the share price a few months ago had reached about $8. So it has come off from that high there. But I'd say just do more due diligence on them. I know there's on social media, there's a few channels I'm sort of like party with, and quite a few of the people in there are really looking into Soluna a lot more. So certainly want to sort of pay a bit more attention to. But again, read their presentation slide, look at the updates, listen to some of John's podcasts with us. John Belazaire, the CEO, one of our great, I enjoy when John comes on there because he gives everything a real good. It's all fresh and good information, and all about different things that we're not used to, not seeing. It's all about projects and how they're doing business. So definitely want to pay a bit more attention to. Bitcoin hodl. Well, this doesn't really change apart from we know who the big hodlers are. We know Marathon. Marathon now are over 26,200. They announced that recently. Plus, they'll have their September production, which we anticipate now. It looks like all their production going forward they'll want to maintain. Why would you sell any production now if you've just bought Bitcoin? I can't see the reason. Can't see the reason for buying Bitcoin at 60,000 and then selling your production, which comes in like maybe under 60,000. I don't know. So they'll probably, there'll be one that hodl everything. Riot's over the 10,000 mark, so a great achievement for them. They're into second place there. Hut maintaining that 9,105. So they've maintained above 9,105 for quite a few months now. CleanSpark, fast on the heels. So I'm going to say in probably 4 months' time, they'll be close to overtaking Hut at the rate they're growing. Hive, again, for what we say one of the smaller miners now. They were one of the biggest miners in 2021, 2022, but they haven't grown as quickly as shareholders would have liked. But they've managed to do things organically, so they haven't got the big debt problems some of the miners have had in the past. They look after G&A costs. They're really good at what they do on a smaller scale than some of the bigger miners. So, generally Hive and Bitfarms, who are next on the table there, they're operating the top two. So Hive have got a nice little hodl there. And for a company that's valued at under 350 million, and you look at the enterprise value and look at the hash rate by enterprise value, they come out, pretty much at the top of the tree along with the likes of Riot. So from a valuation perspective, certainly one to pay more attention to. Bitfarms as well, over 1,000, over 1,100 Bitcoin. And bear in mind, they had, 3,000 or 4,000 Bitcoin in the previous cycle and had to sell it all because of the impacts of debt. Now they're debt free and they've started to grow that hodl again. They've got to a nice position and they're basically using some of their production to cover operational costs and then hodling the rest of it. Bit Digital, this only shows their Bitcoin.
I was going to ask, you don't convert Ethereum to Bitcoin equivalency, do you?
No, not on this table. No, this is just purely Bitcoin hodl. But
hey, and let's pause on both.
Let me finish this. They do have 27,000 Ethereum on there. DMG, again, for a small miner, a really good size hodl. You're talking, the best part of $26 million in Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And in these climates at the moment, as you're trying to grow, that gives them opportunities to do a number of things with that. They can leverage that Bitcoin, raise debt through that there. They can sell the Bitcoin to buy more machines. So that gives them opportunities. And then you've got the two smaller ones, SATO and Gryphon. We've already spoke quite a bit about them already in the podcast.
Yeah, and let's pause on Bit Digital and DMG for a second, Anthony, because we haven't touched on them in detail. Bit Digital and DMG, both relatively small on the market cap scale, but definitely a good hodl on both of these companies' balance sheets. And Bit Digital specifically, Anthony, you mentioned Ethereum makes up a huge component of this balance sheet as well. So maybe we can just run through exactly how that balance sheet positions Bit Digital moving forward here.
Yeah, one of the strongest balance sheets of all the Bitcoin miners. We're talking zero debt. So in terms of any sort of like long-term debt, they don't have any. All they've got is a small amount of leases. So majority of these mining companies, like for their sort of like offices, they'll have like they'll lease the building. So literally every miner has small leases, and Bitdish are no different than that. They've got some small leases. But in terms of anything long-term debt like notes or loans, zero, no debt. So that's from a balance sheet perspective, very, very strong. Market capitalization today, I'm going to say it's around about the $420 million. And when you look at the treasury position, it was 216 million as at the end of that was the end of August. If you look at their enterprise value will be something like about $200 million. And for $200 million enterprise value, that's effectively, if you're buying the company for 420 million and you've got 216 million in the treasury, you're getting that company for effectively 200 million. And yes, you could argue there's going to be a premium. We could talk about that another day. There are premiums on miners. We noticed, the premium that Riot applied to Bitfarms and Bitfarms applied to Stronghold and CleanSpark and Grid and Riot and Block. So we can, but if setting aside premium at the moment, if you looked at Bit Digital and said it's a $200 million company from an enterprise value, and what does it give you for 200 million? Well, shortly their revenues for HPC are going to be close to 100 million a year annualized revenues. And they've still got about probably 30-40 million in Bitcoin mining revenues for the year as well. So a company that delivers $140 million of revenues a year and is valued at an enterprise value of 200 million, you tell me whether that's a good deal or not. And then compare that to the enterprise value of, say, Marathon or CleanSpark and see how much revenue they're delivering for their enterprise value. I'd say Bit Digital are sort of like a strong position. But they are, from a mining perspective, they're one of the smallest Bitcoin miners. But I'd say for certainly looking at revenues, they are punching above their weight at the moment. And I would say people need to certainly, listen to Sam on various podcasts that he does. He's been on our channel probably, I think, 5 times this year. So he's been on more than anybody else in terms of CEOs been on the podcast. And he's always great to have on the show. Again, you get to hear, the transparency, and you also get to hear it, in his style as well. He's very open, very forefront in the way he puts it across there. And if you get the chance, go to the HC Wainwright website. Look at try and dig out there was a panel recently where they had the likes of Fred Thiel, Ben Gagnon, Sam Tabar, Adam Sullivan, and Zach Bradford from CleanSpark. And it was led by, in fact, the Bitcoin mining panel there was led by Anthony Scaramucci. That was a great hours discussion there, and you get 5 different perspectives from 5 different mining CEOs, and Sam puts up a good case for Bit Digital. Ben Gagnon puts up a great case for Bitfarms. I think to be honest, I think Ben stole the show a little bit on that one there in terms of his responses. Anthony actually said he provided the best response on the day. I don't know if they get any advance warning of the questions or anything like that, but if they don't, I'm going to give him 10 out of 10 for some of them responses because they were word perfect and articulated. We know that,
That's why I posted that tweet saying, how can you listen to this and not be proud? The guy's awesome.
Probably outside of myself, he's probably the smartest guy in the room.
Well, of course, maybe. Yeah.
People
without saying, Anthony, you don't even have
to say now.
Yeah, we don't even bring that up. Hey, the other one we wanted to get your take on as it relates to the hodl here, Anthony, DMG, big portion of Bitcoin on their balance sheet as well. They just came out with this SOC 2 compliance. We talked about the impact of the trust company last week, so we don't need to get into that. But if we take a look at DMG, based on market cap, they're one of the smallest we cover on the channel here. However, again, great percentage of that market cap is held in Bitcoin itself.
Yeah, and that's and people need to be clear. That's 79 million in Canadian dollars. So that's probably about $15 in American money or something like that.
$20. Yeah, $20. I'm just kidding. It is in Canadian.
Did they invent monopoly in Canada? Because it seems
I'll
to
do
go
the math quick on that one.
it's probably close to 50. Yeah, it's probably close to 50.
DMG 79 divided by 1.35. You're looking at about 58.5.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense there. And again, if you look at what they're delivering for 58 million, and then compare that to say Marathon, what they're delivering for 4.6 billion. So there's a company that's 100 times bigger. Are their revenues 100 times bigger? I don't think so. So it's something to bear in mind. I mean, DMG Sheldon has set that company up about 7 or 8 years ago. He was with Bitfury in the early days of mining. He's like probably, I'm going to say, in terms of the public miners and those that were there at the start of it, he's probably the OG in the space. I don't think there's many people being. I mean, yes, Ben was doing Bitcoin mining at a young age, but Sheldon was delivering companies that were building mining facilities, and he's helped design mining facilities. He was part of the design for Bitdeer's facility in Rockdale. He's built mining pools. He's built containers. So he's designed containers for other miners to use. These are public miners to use for their facilities. So he's got his fingers in every pie. They used to host miners, DMG. Now they're a self-miner only.
Now they've got the trust as well.
And they've got systemic trust. Yeah, so they've got, in fact, I mean, my only sort of concern with DMG is they're sort of like spread across so many different business units. It's like, in the current climate, would I sort of focus on one or two of them and try and drive everything new there? But I can't argue with Sheldon. Sheldon's been in the space longer than I have. I'm an accountant, so I look at numbers. He looks at the whole, he'll be looking at the whole business and saying they can deliver it. So hopefully their updates will start showing. I'm talking about their earnings update. We know what their general monthly updates, and they are a top 5 or top 6 miner. So when we get to the last slide, we'll see exactly where DMG are. But as I say, this is the HODL slide again there. So yeah, now we're on to the final slide, and this is really sort of highlights who can consistently produce the numbers month by month. Who's really delivering. And so we've talked about Bitfarms and Hive because they've been number 1 and 2 for the last 4 years in various. So Hive in 2021, 2022 were the number 1 miner. In 2023, Bitfarms took over that. Hive dropped to second, and the same's happening now. But believe you me, if you look at the average there, you're talking a hair between the pair of them now. So if the slightest improvement from Hive occurs in September, they will take top spot. And what's interesting, actually, SATO are actually these last few months have also had some good. So in June and in August, they had really good months where they outperformed Bitfarms in both of those months, and they've moved into 3rd slot, and their average is 37.5. Now, again, if you look at the averages now and go back to a table for say 2023. The gap is massively closing now. You can go down to Core Scientific at 34.3 or even, to likes of Bitdeer at 34 and compare that with Bitfarms and say that's actually now literally 6 or 7% for the whole year between the top 13 miners. That's nothing. Last year, there was like 20, 30, 40% between some of the miners. This year, the gap has narrowed. And so, a miner having a really good month can move it up the table. Literally, you're not having to worry about doing it for 8 months. September, we might see the top 3 or 4 actually change positions if depending on how well they do. We know that Hut have had their problems throughout the year, but we started to see some signs of recovery there, and hopefully we'll see an order for machines to come through and start getting their production hopefully in the last quarter of the year where it should be. We know Riot from their energy, so this table doesn't take account of any energy. They've done all the sort of they've done all the sort of like the strategy to get the power sales and the enhanced credits through there. So that's a reason for them there. You know, it's from a top 13 there. It's really, really close.
And that's nice to see, Anthony, right? It's great to see the neck and neck competition.
And Right's only 10% away for the whole year. So it's not like there's even that gap there. 10%, bear in mind, they'll have took something like probably, you know, double digits in the millions of power sales and energy credits. So that will account for something.
Yeah. Just minutes away now from the Fed announcement, Anthony. It looks like about 5 minutes out. So going to be really interesting to see how that progresses here. This is the final slide we had in terms of the monthly review for August. I wanted to just jump back to what we're seeing in the headlines here as we start to get closer to this Fed meeting, Anthony. Going to be a very interesting close to the day here for the Bitcoin mining stocks and the market in general. Curious to get any final thoughts from you before we close out the session today.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin's just gone above 60,000. So again, so for like intraday, it's getting back to where it was at the start of the day. It dropped down to 59,000, but it's recovered a little bit this last few hours. So since the market's opened, it's slowly recovered, and there's maybe a couple more Bitcoin stocks now in the green. So we've got the likes of Riot, Wulf, Bitdeer, Bit Digital, and Cause are all in the green at the moment. Soluna, DMG, and DigiHost probably at the bottom end of the scale. Soluna down 6.3% at the moment. So again, you know, take note of the daily movements. See if there's any news associated with that as to why that's down. But we know that Soluna is one of these companies that can, you know, with all these Bitcoin miners, that the change in a daily change there, it's not unprecedented to see some like 40, 50% moves in a day when the Bitcoin price changes, or we get some really good news. I mean, remember, the start of the year, we saw the IREN share price where it was then, it went to $15.50 when they highlighted the fact they were going to, rather than get to 20 by the end of the year, they were going to go to 30 exahash. News like that, which is, you know, big news changes, big growth. The market really like that. The market at the moment does like the HPC news. So that's why you can see all the mining companies. And I'll do a slide for the next presentation to show the impact of HPC on the share price this year for those miners compared to what we call the pure play miners. So it'll be those miners that haven't physically got a HPC in place, even though they've said they're sort of interested, just to see what that means. But we know the last time I did it, it was the likes of Riot, Marathon, CleanSpark, and sort of Bitfarms were at the bottom of the table, and then Wulf, IREN, Core Scientific, and Hut were at the sort of like the other end of the table. So you know, it's quite a polarized view. And what I'm seeing in the market at the moment with the daily changes, that it still seems to be more polarized towards these miners who are interested in HPC or going to be delivering HPC. I mean, if Wulf announced something, that would be interesting to see. I mean, their share price at the moment, their valuation, they've got a higher valuation, I think, than... Can we go back to the valuation chart? I think it's higher than IREN's.
Just one sec, I'll bring it up here. I'm curious to see just how this rate decision comes out, Anthony. So I'm thinking we might as well just delay for a couple more minutes here. I believe it comes out at 2 p.m. Eastern in 2 minutes. We'll get the decision. And in turn, you're wanting market cap slide?
Just put the market cap slide up, please. Yeah, the one in
yeah.
Yep. So, yeah, if we look at Wulf there at 1.55 billion and IREN below it 1.50 billion, I mean, that's got me scratching my head there because, you know, IREN have got 18 exahash and Wulf have got 10. And IREN have got 15 million of annualized HPC revenues, whereas Wulf haven't got any annualized revenues in HPC at the moment, but they will start to deliver. So I'm suggesting that the Wulf share price has already got something built in there for a potential announcement. It has to be, because I just don't understand it. I mean, we know that IREN made a mistake in sort of June when they went down the hedge for the energy price for July, August, September, and that's probably cost them about $11 million in total, but they've managed to get themselves out of that. And if you look at what their energy price per Bitcoin was in the month of August, it was down to, I think it was under 30,000. I think it was like $29,000. So that was far cheaper than TeraWulf were able to mine their Bitcoin. So yes, they've made a mistake and they put their hands up straight away and they've paid the price. They've bought themselves out of it. It cost them a one-off fee of 7.2 million plus what they'd incurred in terms of a higher rate of cost for the month of July, and they were paying 61,000 in energy cost to mine a Bitcoin. That was bringing in less than the revenue was less than the energy cost. So if you look at what Wulf did that month in terms of July, I think they were mining it close to 30,000 per Bitcoin. So it hit IREN for about significant amount for their production. And so I looked at the figure, added it to the 7.2. It came out at about 11 million. So that was a sort of like a very simplistic way of looking at the cost incurred. But now going forward, their hash rate at 18.8 is going to be 20. So they're going to have double the hash rate of TeraWulf.
Look at the markets, Anthony, right now. Look at the markets spiking, you guys. Just you can see the S&P 500, Dow 30, everything just going parabolic here.
And Bitcoin's just gone to 61,000 effectively in the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to stall you guys. So it's looking like the market is not selling the news here and reacting very favorably. I hope
now we only have 3 miners in the red now, so literally all the miners are green now. So
Bitdeer up 8%, or Bit Digital 8%. Cores, our good friend. Somebody do a health check on A-Trades here. We're gonna have some upset shorts here, Anthony. Great to see you guys. Excellent to see the market not selling off with the news coming from the Fed, and should be a great close in the next 2 hours of trading here.
Any final questions from the group watching? How many have we got watching at the moment?
We've got 52, so these are the real dedicated viewers. How are you guys feeling about this? We'll pull up just the view where we can see ourselves here. We got a lot of people happy in the comments here. Come to mama. Thank Fook. 0.5, Anthony, we got. So it was in the upper end of the range.
Oh, yeah, have they announced 0.5 then, have they?
Based on Scott's comment, yeah. So obviously coming in above, everyone, including yourself, expecting 0.25. This is even more bullish. And with that being said, I better get to the bank and renew this mortgage, Anthony, while I can. Great end to the day, you guys. Hopefully you made some money in the market today. Anthony, if you want to keep going, I'm more than happy to. If not, we're at the 2 hour mark. You guys, if you're making money, which all of you should be now, based on that move we just saw, make sure you hit the like button before you go, and have a great rest of your day.
Bryce, last one to finish on. Drink Yorkshire tea.
What is that?
James asked me what type of tea do I drink. So we have a tea in the UK.
Oh, okay.
Yorkshire tea. So it's probably one of the best brands of tea that we have here. Certainly one of the nicest tasting. I'm actually from, believe it or not, I'm from Lancashire. So if people know the history, Yorkshire and Lancashire at war for over 100 years in the UK, back through the centuries, back before even America was America. And so, we had actually the two ruling houses of England were the House of York, House of Lancaster. And so for me to say Yorkshire teas, it's quite hard, really. But it is a nice brand of tea. My son got me introduced to it, and yeah.
Good tea recommendation to end the day as well. Scott, I'm hoping pump now, no dump as well. We'll see. The good news is, guys, whether or not it goes up or down today, I think long term we're in the right spot here. So have a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate all the support. We'll be back tomorrow with a regular podcast.